Well, Elliott, thank you so much for joining us. As we start, can you maybe talk a little bit about your role in the company?
Yeah, currently I lead infrastructure and security for ServiceMaster brands, and so that's everything except in IT, pretty much except for DevOps. So telecom, network, servers, security, and infrastructure.
I see. I understand. And can you talk about your background? How did you get involved in technology and cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's interesting. Both my parents were school teachers, and so you talk about after school and sitting around in the school buildings and kind of being bored and going to the library, and then the old computer labs with the old back then it was the Radio Shack, the TRS-80 machines and trying to figure out how to program and things like that. Was just always interested in then saving up and buying, the Commodore 64 with the tape player and everything. Going to college and not knowing, at that point in time, there weren't any real cybersecurity degrees. So just getting a standard business degree. And while I was in college, I got a job working for an internet provider startup. Of course, this is dial-up, and so I worked there providing tech support throughout my time in college, and got a promotion there and to be like a system administrator with the Unix servers. And it was very interesting. And then I started teaching internet courses, like community development at the college. And that's really how I got my start. Really being and serving in the help desk is I think one of the best ways to get started because you get such a broad understanding of all the different technologies and the challenges. And so that's really kind of how I got my start. I'll say how I got my first job in high school was, I hacked the high school grade system where I was at school. But since both my parents were teachers, I let my dad know right away. I'm like, hey, I don't think this is supposed to be this easy. And so he reached out to the company that was supposed to be managing it for us, and they hired me. And so I worked for them for 4 years as well, part time when I was in college. So that was fun. We traveled around to all the different school districts that they had contracts for in the state of Texas, and I was securing their networks. And back then it was old Novell networks with floppy drives and all that fun stuff.
I remember those times.
Yep.
It's amazing. So it's also amazing that you actually told them about the vulnerability and you didn't just help yourself and your friends to get
Yeah.
to
People
get
said
to get the GPA they wanted.
that's right. It's like, no, I didn't change any of my grades, but that was just, that was the start of, I guess, ethical hacking, right? And then I was like, "You're going to pay me to do this?" And back then, they gave me a company vehicle back then, in high school, and then a bag phone. I was like, "Wow, this is great. This is fantastic." Working for them, and we're sitting in hotel rooms at night, making patch cables to go do the networking with the next day, and crawling up in the ceilings and doing the networking and the cabling. And then actually, it's interesting. We block USB drives now, but back then we would go to Dell and we would buy, a ton of computers and open every box and take out the floppy drives so that the students wouldn't be able to put in, any floppy disks and try to hack the system. Just crazy, how things have changed. But there's always creative people out there, and I think that's when you're sitting there with nothing to do is when that's dangerous, especially for hackers.
Absolutely, it's almost like a puzzle you need to solve, right? What's the find the weakest link and then
Absolutely, yeah,
take a
absolutely.
hammer to it, I guess. Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's you talk about the technology of the days long gone, like floppy disks and things like this. So it sounds like you have a very long and interesting career. So for people who are just starting to look at cybersecurity, either kind of transitioning from technical background, looking to make a career in cybersecurity, or even students as they now there are plenty of universities and colleges that you can take a course and get and different certifications and things like this. So for people who are just kind of looking to make a career, from your vantage point, what would you recommend they focus on? What for someone who's looking into this field? What would you say top three things they should focus on to set them up for success?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways. I'll say the first is probably a non-traditional answer before I get to the more specifics on subjects. I'm going to say networking, 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 because to get past a lot of these automated HR systems at many companies, it's just impossible. And so there's been so many of my jobs that I've received through, through organizations such as yourself, and where you're doing the networking, and you get to know people on a personal level. I also have hired interns at many of the companies I've worked for, college interns that might not even be in the computer science field. A lot of them are in engineering or different fields, and it goes back to something you said earlier. It's just being able to be a problem solver. Really, you've got to have that critical thinking and be a problem solver and love puzzles. And so that's, you could say, yeah, you should have some good solid understanding of the maths and the sciences. Obviously the whole STEM curriculum, I'm a strong proponent of the science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those are huge. You don't have to be a coder, although things like understanding scripting and Python and those things, that's always going to help you in terms of writing scripts and automating a lot of the mundane, boring tasks. But again, I will also say that I love to promote team members that are on the help desk. You say that's a great place to start, and you can see who's hungry. You can see who's you have team members that they'll see something and they'll automate their way out of a job, and those are the people I want to that I want to hire in security. You don't have to have, at least my mindset, you don't have to have security experience. And there's so many openings, and I think a lot of that is an HR problem, not a we say it's a talent gap. I think it's an HR problem personally, just because you can't get past many of these automated systems. There's a lot of hungry folks out there with great skills, but they don't have the traditional security background.
Hmm.
Again, myself, I was a system administrator, a Lotus Notes back then, a Lotus Notes administrator before I got into security. But I was always curious about how the security of the systems worked, and so that's what got me, directly involved in information security, and understanding. Again, also there was regulations, a lot of the regulatory components. But if I were in college, if I were, trying to study, obviously the STEM subjects are great. Now there's a lot of great universities that have information assurance degrees and cybersecurity degrees, or just, IT degrees. I've also found that if you can have a strong understanding of the networking, the networking components in terms of, uh, this time we're talking about like the actual computer switching and routing. That's huge, because that's an area of information security that I think a lot of folks forget about. We're so focused on the cloud and the data, but without the network to get there, that is, and while there is no perimeter anymore with everyone working from home, you still, being able to protect that is key. And so that's an area that I really think is forgotten about, is the actual networking, routing, and switching component.
Certainly, certainly. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned. It sounds like being curious, and having kind of this relentless attitude is often more important than having kind of the right by the book background that checks the box for HR. But if you don't have a passion, it's really hard to sustain your interest for kind of a length of time. It's interesting that, and it's actually kind of echoes with some of the comments that I heard from other CISOs, that they all come from different backgrounds, that being constantly curious and constantly learning to learn new things and kind of upgrade yourself with technology is a prerequisite. But sometimes it's more important than coming through the ranks through kind of a more traditional background. So
Yeah.
it certainly rings true. So I get switching gears a little bit. Uh, I know that I've went to RSA, I've went to Black Hat, and since there are certain themes that they're top of mind for everyone. Right now, it's addressing work from home environment, ransomware, cloud security, probably the topics that top of mind for a lot of people. But imagine you have a crystal ball, you can see into the future. 12 months from now, what do you think will be the top three things? Either maybe same things that are now, but in your view, what will be prevalent? What will be the top three things everyone will be concerned about 12 months from now?
Yeah, I'm always pretty boring when this question comes up, because I'm a huge back to the basics person. And uh, you know, right now, and it's going to continue. To me, third party risk is the biggest challenge that all cybersecurity professionals have, because we have so many vendor partners that we have to rely on. And so just making sure, how do we verify and validate that our vendor partners that have all of our customer data as well, how that they're protecting that information, and making sure it continuously available, from ransomware attacks with the third parties. identity and access management continues to be a challenge, and it doesn't matter where you're at. Then if you're in the cloud or on prem, because we're seeing where the bad guys are now getting frustrated that we've turned multi-factor on pretty much across the board, and so now they're going at I won't name names, but texting companies that you can read about that's sending us those two-factor codes to try to hack them in order to redirect those. And so identity and access management is going to continue to be huge. So I would say third-party risk, identity access management, or the top two. From a third standpoint, it's going to go back to what you mentioned earlier in terms of just the perimeter. And so if you can do things like working from home, these micro segmentation is going to be huge. So if I get ransomware, if I infect something, it's only my one device, my one machine, and I'm really limiting that attack surface, because that's not going away. Ransomware is obviously not going away. They've been so successful, and they continue to be so successful with it, and it's obviously profitable for them, for the criminals. And so those are the three I would say.
Yeah. No, it certainly makes a lot of sense, because it's, if everyone is, well, not everyone, but most, a lot of people work from home, and God knows what links my kids are clicking on, what is,
Right.
what kind of bait click they're reacting to, what they're downloading. It's on a home network. It certainly does keep me at night, and to make sure that, and I mean, it's kind of conversation with people in the household on what to do, what not to do, and if certain things seem to be too good to be true, it's probably a trap, or there's a gotcha on the other end of it. And I'm sure from the corporate perspective, it's looking all the like forward deployed people. I imagine it's probably quite a big headache and a challenge, because everyone is like, how do you know that all systems are patched? How to make sure that everything is up to date? It just from logistics standpoint, it seems like a pretty big headache and quite a nightmare. No, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? In terms of, we used to have, obviously we still have to rely on layers of security, but we used to be able to have a little better control of those layers from the perimeter standpoint, knowing when you brought a device in to a corporate environment, we could run some additional checks and scans, and certainly there's ways for you to do that remotely as well. But it's much more challenging if an agent goes offline or something and it's at someone's house, and are you going to be notified of that, and how do you remediate that? So it's certainly, and you're right, folks are trying to do maybe their schooling and different things on their work devices, and so that presents another challenge of, is my home network safe and secure? And even though I've got a VPN, a direct VPN on mine, if it's being used for multiple things, and then they've been able to compromise that through the VPN, so it's certainly much more challenging. And so security awareness, it's like, how can we do security awareness at a family level, really, not just an employee level, and try to educate you and your family on, and make it entertaining and not boring, and practical. So it's not just protect the corporate device, but protect, here's how to protect your bank account and all these fraudulent text and smishing, and all these different things just in your personal lives as well.
Absolutely. And they're getting better and better. Like I get emails that I'm just, I want to click, and then I check, well, it's actually the email that's coming from is not the brand that it's part of the email. They're getting more and more sophisticated. And it's like social engineering, I think, is a big part of it. And it kind of goes back. I mean, you can upgrade your technology, but users, sometimes it's just, there are certain patterns, behavioral patterns, they're so ingrained in us. And it's going back before computers. I was reading a book by Kevin Mitnick. Not sure if he was before computers. He used to like walk in big, I think AT&T or Verizon, and would get information that he needed, just using pretexting and all those things, like before the computers. But now it's all of it is automated, and I've seen use cases with AI being deployed by nefarious actors, and it's scary what's coming. So to your point, I mean, educating people, people your kind of immediate family, it's a big deal of keeping the home network safe, and by derivation, corporate networks as well.
Right.
Elliott, I'm sure you probably, kind of, again, switching gears a little bit, I'm sure you're kind of part of various professional networks CISO, cybersecurity executives. Some are local, some are virtual, and we try to look at what other organizations are doing, and we want to make sure that we provide value. And kind of with this in mind, just as a form of feedback for Athenia, what is that? What's some of the things that you like that we do, whether it's content, whether it's some of the opportunities to connect with members, and what do you think where we can do a better job? What will be kind of top of mind for you in those two areas?
Yeah, I think, obviously the just the newsletter, the weekly newsletter to me is very beneficial because I have to obviously provide board updates and board reports, and there's so many different sources of news, and you can catch yourself going down, rabbit trails looking and trying to find good sources to get that information from. That's been extremely helpful. And then you're right, the connections and networking, and you're already starting the in-person, events as well. So those are all fantastic opportunities to meet, because really to share information, you're with other CISOs. They've got these ISACs and different things, but those are industry specific, and sometimes it's great just to have a smaller group that you can share, regardless of industry. And so that's been very beneficial. Um, in terms of maybe different things, I don't know. I'm not aware. So maybe you can let me know on this. Things like a Slack group certainly are beneficial as well. So I'm not sure if that's something that's in the works or if that's already been done. But that can be very beneficial as well for just sharing quick questions and having information amongst the peers.
Interesting. It's something that we considered. We probably going to look at it definitely before the end of the year. We just want to make sure that when we launch it, there was enough awareness, and we want to make sure that people are. We don't create yet another system that people don't use. So what we try to be very deliberate and very intentional in terms of how we launch it, so that it's an active extension of the community, not just another channel with still content. So but I think it's a great idea because this ability to have this ambient network where you can ask a question and receive an answer more or less in real time from not from vendors but from people you trust, someone who's done it before, and you can connect with them, and they're vetted, they're not going to misuse this information. I think it could be beneficial. We just want to make sure that when we launch it in kind of a very thoughtful way. But I think it's a great suggestion. Certainly something we will we'll put an action plan before the end of the year of launching something like this. And there's actually, if it's okay with you, would love to get your kind of ideas on how best to position it so that you do get the as instantaneous of a feedback as possible. But I think it's a great suggestion. Um, Speaking of, so I mentioned vendors. We work with some of the partners, and some of them are doing a better job connecting with cybersecurity professionals. Some we find are a little bit less tactful and probably more aggressive. I'm sure your email inbox is full of people trying to get on your calendar and things like this. So I want to ask you, from the vendors you've interacted with in the last 6 months, 12 months, what are some of the things that surprised you in a positive way? What did they do to make the conversation or make the interaction productive and helpful? And what are some of your pet peeves that you've seen salespeople do that just absolutely non-starters for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously a common one. I'll say a couple of things. One is, some of these organizations are large enough that they can actually hire, they use different terms, but I'll just say like resident CISOs, and CISOs from, companies that folks are usually, getting close to retirement, or maybe just, again, want a totally different kind of role. And so they will work for these larger vendors. They can set up calls with you. They're, for the most part, they just honestly want to help you. They're not commission based. And obviously they want to hear about your roadmap, give you ideas based on their career, of things you can tweak in your roadmap. And then sure, if there's a place in that roadmap for their technology for the company they're working for, well then they'll let you know about that. But not, again, they're not quota based, so they're not pushy or anything, and they just really want to genuinely help you. That's been I see a lot of companies, again, you've got to be pretty large to be able to afford some folks like that on your staff. um, Something else that I've seen is, again, as we are coming back to some of the in-person events, which I'm a huge proponent of, there are some sponsors, that are setting up at those in-person events, and of course, that's going to be the best way when you're sponsoring a dinner or something where you've got a small intimate group, maybe 20 or so security leaders from the local community, and you can just have a conversation there, and it's, I'll say, non-threatening, but yet you're hearing about new technologies or a new use of an existing technology. Those are great. Yeah, the LinkedIn introductions or the emails or the cold calls. I feel for those those folks just trying to do their job, but there's just no way you're not going to get a response from me on any of those. Um, but sponsoring, even to some degree, I've seen where folks, some may be allowed into some of those Slack channels that I'm a part of, but they know the rules and they know they'll get banned pretty quick if they try to sell things. But they're good. I mean, a lot of these sales engineers and others, they are. I mean, they've come from our roles and they've got a lot of really good experience and they can really contribute to the conversation. It's just a matter of how hard they're being pressed as well for meeting quotas and different things. But I still say plugging in and sponsoring as many. And you're right. I mean, I'm a part of a lot of local professional organizations, whether it be ISSA or ISOC or these different local groups, and so if they can sponsor some of those, that's a huge help. They're going to get to meet people there, and not in a pressure type setting.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of events and dinners, we actually, I mean, I'm sure you noticed we're planning a series of social events. So no vendors, just peer to peer, member to member, and those are kind of mostly for networking and the kind of social setting. So we're starting to plan some of those, as well as we did get an indication from a number of our partners to sponsor dinners, which will be more formal, I know, a private room at a fancy restaurant kind of thing. So is it something, once we roll those out, is it something that you potentially could see yourself participating in?
Yeah, those are huge. I do that all the time. So, especially here in the Nashville area where I'm at, yeah, I go to every one of those that I can, and obviously
Hmm.
I have to balance, family life, but that those are huge. I want to support those vendors that are willing to come locally again and kind of engage our community. It gets us together, and then again, we're going to learn something, whether it's just from a sidebar conversation or maybe it is a different use of a technology or a technology we've never heard of, because obviously folks may have a limited marketing budget, but yeah, absolutely, those are fantastic events.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Elliot, I know we're kind of up on time, and I appreciate you taking time for this. As kind of, if members want to reach out to you, what's the best place to send them? LinkedIn? What's your kind of favorite channel of engaging with peers?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's the best place. You can find me on LinkedIn, no problem at all, and I'm happy to reach out and visit.
Absolutely, Elliot. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, thank you.